Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and we're going to talk about quests from the Infinite Staircase, Chapter 1. And today we're going to talk about Nafas, the genie that is bound to the Infinite Staircase. And then basically, and what we're going to talk about is his power, Last Wish. Okay, so fantastic Dungeons & Dragons Canon hardback. And Nafas is this genie that is bound to the Infinite Staircase. So the Infinite Staircase is hugely important in Dungeons & Dragons now. It is this collection of, it's an infinite staircase that is connected to infinite doors. And those doors connect to every single world on every plane of existence. Universe beyond? I don't think it's very beyond. Love it. Woo! You have no idea I love that aspect. I think what's fascinating about Dungeons & Dragons is it flips everything, right? The entire business world has worked forever on, oh, I'm sorry, there's a little bit of boilerplate there, there's a little text you missed, right? And now you're jammed to the wall because we have everything. Dungeons & Dragons has flipped this. The creatives have absolutely hogtied every executive who's ever attached themselves to Dungeons & Dragons. Dungeons & Dragons has infiltrated, I think, every important intellectual property in the world has been infiltrated by Dungeons & Dragons, and the executives never knew it. And the reason why is the fine print is in the lore, right? And I know this and I see this. I don't think anybody else is really seeing this right now, but Van Gogh died unrecognized, right? Everybody's like, was he the best artist who ever lived? Yeah, right. Sunflowers, it's $80 million. Okay. It's really, I'm so fascinated with this. So, okay. So basically Dungeons & Dragons is again just saying whatever story you're telling, it's ours, right? And this is Gary's legacy, right? On day one of Dungeons & Dragons, right? He completely usurped the entire Tolkien intellectual property, right? And then the Tolkien estate was like, hey, this is a major crime. Could you stop doing that? And he goes, and Gary was like, sure, I'll stop that for 50 years. When I'm dead, people will send the Tolkien estate checks, and you guys will smile as we reprint what you just called a crime. And that's exactly what happened. It is astonishing what happens on Dungeons & Dragons. It doesn't happen on any intellectual property in the world. And it is a situation in which the creatives have completely owned the executives, and the executives have no idea it's even happened, right? And every dungeon master in the world is writing checks on the value that has been reaped by Dungeons & Dragons. It's absolutely incredible. There's nothing like it, okay? And it has to do with Fortnite, in my humble opinion. And actually, you could see that on, I got a little, I got a little short that explains that whole thing. Check out the card, The Cube. It's brilliant. All right, okay, let's go. So, quest from the Infinite Staircase. The Infinite Staircase is extremely important. It connects Dungeons & Dragons to every world, every plane of existence, including this one, right? And so who oversees this incredible device, this incredible occurrence, right? This incredible force, right? It's Nafas. And Nafas is this genie, right? Now, he's different than most other genies. One, he's not contained, right? He literally, one of his powers is he cannot be put into a container, okay? So, but he is bound to the Infinite Staircase. And this is very important. He cannot go through any door, okay? He has to stay on the other side of the Infinite Staircase. But he and other forces connected to the Infinite Staircase, anyone who makes their way onto the Infinite Staircase can go to anywhere they wish to go. It just takes 4 to 12 hours, right? So Nafas is here. He's super important. But what I was stunned by, okay, is basically the book talks about Nafas throughout the entire book. In each chapter he's mentioned, right? But then he has his own stat block. And this is, again, extremely important, right? So the book handles Nafas in the lore, in what he can do and what his story is, right? But then his stat block, and this is a power, this is a superpower of Dungeons and Dragons. It's like, hey, here's the lore, here's the story. Any other story could have given you this, right? But we are going to go further. We're going to show you the exact mechanics of how this works. And I'll tell you, this is super important. Like, listen carefully, okay? The biggest horror movie of the year is Longlegs. And by the way, Quiet Place Day 1 is not a horror movie, it's really a thriller. Okay, Longlegs was famous. It is doing extremely well because it explains everything. And that's what the stat block is, right? There's nothing hidden. Like, it literally, like, Nafas has 350 hit points, okay? You can take him to 0 hit points, right? Yep, you're right. You caught it. You can't kill him. Right? Like, we'll get there. Okay? All right. So, but this really blew me. So, Nafas has a brilliantly executed stat block. It's very long. There's a lot on it. Okay? And one of the things on it is this simple power. And actually, this is one of the things I absolutely love about Dungeons & Dragons. It takes complex things and it summarizes them carefully, brilliantly, and concisely, right? It really, like, it snaps complexity like a button, right? So this is very complex, but it's boiled down. Now, why can Dungeons and Dragons do this? Why can it take extremely complex things and explain them very quickly and very exactly so that they can be used powerfully? Magic the Gathering. They've been doing this for 30 years, right? Complex rules are boiled down to the absolute minimum, like a stock, like a soup stock, right? Like, it's really a thing, right? So let's talk about Nafas's power, Last Wish, okay? This is incredible. It's incredible on Nafas, excuse me. But it's also incredible that something this powerful and something this awesome is boiled down into 2 paragraphs. And this can be built into a spell. This can be put into an item. This can be, put into a tattoo for a character, something similar, maybe modified, but even used exactly, right? This is incredible. So listen to this. So Nafas has this power that is called Last Wish. What is it? Okay. So so your adventurers get, they drank too much coffee that night, and they're like, we're gonna kill, and your player characters, your dragon masters, drank too much coffee, and their player characters get uppity, and they're like, we're gonna kill Nafas. Now, the other thing, this is really fascinating, right? So this could happen at a table, right? So the player characters at your table, run by the dragon masters, kill Nafas. So there's 5 dragon masters, red, white, and blue, green, and black, right? Your blue dragon master kills Nafas, stabs him with a short sword, he goes to 0. Nafas then dies, okay? Last Wish kicks in. So here's what happens. Nafas goes to 0 hit points, but rather than dying, he immediately transformed into multiversal dust. He is a creature of the multiverse, okay? So he's a creature of the multiverse, and this is normal, right? So he turns into multiversal dust, okay? And that multiversal dust then surrounds the character who killed him, the player character who killed him, right? The blue dragon master, their player character is surrounded by this multiversal dust. This is really fascinating, all right? Really fascinating. So what happens to that character? This is very interesting, okay? What happens to that character is they are then asked, they say, you have just slain the guardian of the infinite staircase, okay? You are now going to, you now have the ability to become Nafas. You now have not Nafas. Well, that's interesting. No. So Nafas then dies, And the player character then has the option to take the place of the guardian of the infinite staircase, right? Now, this is incredible in so many ways, right? So one, Nafas is good. There's no reason to do this, right? This is absolutely rewarding absolute nonsense from your player characters, right? But it's really fascinating, right? So one of your player characters then can become the guardian of the infinite staircase. They literally get the stat block of Nafas. They get all of his power. Now, I got this wrong earlier, right? Nafas can cast wishes, but he can only cast wishes on the side of the infinite staircase. He cannot cast a single wish in any world. He can only grant wishes on the side of the infinite staircase, right? He cannot grant wishes on any world. He can't even enter a world, right? But this is really fascinating because at this point, the player character who kills him is then, asked by the universe itself, are you willing to take on the duties of being the guardian of the infinite staircase? So now you're getting a player character who can cast wish on the infinite staircase on any character that gets to the infinite staircase, and has the censor of dreams, right? This palace that Nafas lives in. They're rewarded for killing a good creature in the most spectacular way, but they are also bound to the infinite staircase. Now, what's really fascinating about this is, one, Dungeons & Dragons is moving away from, it's not determining what the player characters can and should do. It's saying, you are the dungeon master. You have those dragon masters in front of you. There may be a reason why your player characters are going to do something that we would judge as bad, right? And they're saying the judgment is no longer coming from Dungeons & Dragons. It rests in the hands of the dungeon master. And this is so fascinating, right? In addition, what if your player character says yes, right? Then it completely changes, right? And I think then what happens is you have a situation where the player character is now running a player character. The Dragon Master is now running a player character that is sending the rest of the team to different worlds, right? And this gets really interesting because their input may only be needed 30, 45 minutes per session, maybe only 30, 45 minutes every 3 or 4 sessions, right? This is really fascinating. We have never gone down this road. Dungeons & Dragons has had this situation where Dragon Masters are at the table for 2 to 4 hours, right? We've really never seen a situation where players spend different amounts of time at the table according to what's been built into a Canon hardback. We have seen this from Critical Role. And get this, Critical Role is now 100% canon to all Dungeons & Dragons rule sets, to the entire rule set. How is that? Well, in my humble opinion, how is that? Well, Matthew Mercer actually consulted on the 2024 PHB, right? So that means Critical Role is literally dusted into the entire rule set, like the whole kit's caboodle, because there's nothing that isn't really touched by the PHB. Every single part of Dungeons & Dragons is touched by the PHB. So that means every single part of Dungeons & Dragons is touched by Matthew Mercer now, right? It's a gumbo. Like, he's cooked it at this point, right? The idea that Matthew Mercer is a competitor to Dungeons & Dragons is ludicrous at this point. He's never going to make a game that beats Dungeons & Dragons. He's too invested in it. Literally invested, right? Like, yeah. I love that, like, the OSR and Indy still think that Matthew Mercer's going to save them. He isn't. Right? Like, okay, so this is truly astounding, right? So we're entering into this phase where we're starting to say not every... And Critical Role did this for a long time. Matthew Mercer would just dismiss players, and they'd be gone for hours of the session, right? Or entire sessions, right? Now, why are we getting into this? Why did he do that? Well, he could do that because they were literally, the reward for playing Dungeons and Dragons what's the reward for playing Dungeons and Dragons with Matthew Mercer? You become a millionaire. That's the reward. Are you willing to sit for a couple hours while everybody else finishes their stuff and then you come back? Yeah, I think you'll wait a week. Like, I think you'll sit on a mountain if I tell you to, right? Like, did you want to be a millionaire? A few people do, Oh, you don't want to be a millionaire? There's about 1,000 people waiting for your seat, okay? It's astounding. Now, what we're seeing now is Dungeons & Dragons, canon books are saying, hey, not all your players are going to be there at the same amount of time. Now, how will we get away with this, right? Well, Dungeons & Dragons is just becoming more and more valuable all the time. That was the lesson of 2023 OGL. Dungeons & Dragons isn't like any game in the world. OSR and indies are not actual competitors to Dungeons & Dragons. What they actually are is they're a big pile of tips that Dungeon Masters can use to add into Dungeons & Dragons using the Dungeon Master Guide page 4. The rules aren't in charge, you are. Right? Just take the best from, eat the meat, spit out the bones. OSR and indie, all OSR and indie canon books now are simply bones, right? And the meat is going to get stripped and put into Dungeons & Dragons, in my humble opinion. Nafas's last wish the ramifications of it is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking, subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.